All right, good afternoon. My name is Blong Yang. I'm the chair of the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee. Today is March the 1st, 2017. And with me today are council members Wright, Palmisano, Gordon, and Quincy. And council president will not be joining us today. I believe she's on some sort of city business. But we are a quorum of this committee, and we can conduct the business of this committee. And today we have 3 items on our agenda. 2 items are consent items, and 1 is a receive and file item. And the first item is a gift acceptance from the New York Police Department of payment for travel-related costs, and this is for travel-related expenses for the chief. Second item is a gift acceptance from the Minnesota Final Four Host Committee for travel-related costs, and this is for Commander Gerliger and other folks to go to Phoenix, Arizona. And the third item is a 2016 fourth quarter report and annual summary from the Civil Rights Department with regards to the Contract Compliance Division. And so council members will address the first 2 items, which are consent items. Anyone want to pull anything off for discussion? All right, I will move items number 1 and 2 for approval. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then the third item is a receive and file item, and it's with the Civil Rights Department. And so, Director Corbel, or okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. As Director Corbel indicated, my name is Sean Skibby. I am the Contract Compliance Division Director here in the Minneapolis Department of Civil Rights. I started with the city here in December 2016, and it's an honor. I'm going to pull up the presentation. Please let me know if there are any issues viewing it for anyone on the committee. So the Contract Compliance Division monitors City of Minneapolis projects and contracts to ensure that minority, women, and low-income business owners and workers have access to contracting and employment opportunities on city contracts, and that workers are paid correct wages. I'm here today to present the fourth quarter division report, and this report provides data for all of the 2016 year. So starting with minority and women business inclusion, for 2016, the division administered the city's small and underutilized business program, or SUBP, and analyzed 131 contracts for goal setting purposes. Goals were set for 46 contracts. Of these 46, 21 of these contracts were awarded because the bidder committed to meeting the goal. 22 were awarded because the division determined that the bidder made a good faith effort to meet the goal. And 3 bidders were denied contracts for a failure to demonstrate good faith efforts. In addition to administering the SUBP program on city contracts, the division also processes applications for certification as part of the Minnesota Unified Certification Program. This program includes the Met Council, the Metropolitan Airports Commission, the Minnesota Department of Transportation, as well as the city. And in 2016, the division certified 23 new firms under the MINUCP, and a total of 149 firms were certified in total by all agencies. So this slide it represents a breakdown of minority and women business inclusion. For 2016, the division monitored 164 contracts totaling over $552 million. During the year, both MBE and WBE certified firms participated on city contracts at higher percentages than previous years. MBE participation was over $35 million, or 8%, an increase of 1% above 2015 numbers and 2% above the 4-year average. WBE participation was over $46 million, or 12%, an increase of 5% above 2015 numbers and 4% above the 4-year average. The division also monitors workforce participation for minority and women employees on city contracts. The goals for workforce participation on city projects are established by the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. And in Minneapolis and the Metro, these goals are 32% minority participation and 6% female participation. In 2016, female workers worked over 179,000 hours on contracts monitored by the division, and the city met its 4-year average with a total of 5% participation. Minorities worked over 685,000 hours, and the city exceeded its 4-year average with 21% participation from employees that identify as part of a minority group. And in addition to administering the city's SUBP and workforce programs, the division also monitors compliance with affirmative action, Section 3, and prevailing wage requirements. In 2016, the city approved affirmative action plans for 260 contracts, certified 89 individuals and 11 businesses under HUD's Section 3 program, and recovered over $102,000 in underpaid wages for 73 workers on 26 city-owned projects. That concludes the presentation of data for this report. The linked report provided also contains more detailed information on inclusion program outcomes administered by the division in 2016. I will just say I'm coming over here recently from another agency at MnDOT. Compared to those agencies, the Contract Compliance Division has a high workload, administering 5 different programs for the city that seek to increase participation and ensure workers are paid fairly. At many other organizations I have worked, including MnDOT, only 1 or 2 of these programs are administered by a single division. So I would like to thank the council and Mayor Hodges for the support and additional resources that have been provided to the department. And with that, the division looks forward to continuing its progress in the programs it administers for 2017 and beyond. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee might have. Otherwise, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the committee's time.
Thank you. Councilmember Palmisano?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Skibby, if you could go back to slide 3, I just had a question of interpretation. What do you suppose the difference between 2015 and 2016's decrease would be attributed to? Is it about the number of projects available, or I mean, it's not overall a big number of projects, but I just noticed it went down last year, and what is your take on that?
Thank you for the question. Just to clarify, are you referencing?
I'm referencing the 2015 to 2016. It just looks like it decreased. I imagine 2014 is about construction projects related to the stadium, perhaps.
Is it related to business inclusion or workforce participation?
Both of them, actually.
Both of them. So for the minority and women business inclusion, there actually appears to have been an increase in MBE participation and WBE participation over 2015 numbers. So it's kind of in a small font. The 2015 numbers are in yellow, and the 2016. Oh, I'm sorry. The 2016 numbers are in purple. So there is a slight decrease. You're correct, Madam Chair, or Madam. I think it is a small decrease. I would have to get more information for you as to the specific reasons why that took place.
It looks like the department.
I think I can help with that answer. If you look at how percentage participation increased for a number of years, if you remember, I think I talked about it maybe 2 years ago at a meeting. Back in 2013, 2014, really municipalities were the only entities building anything, because the private sector wasn't really building, and they were coming out of a recession. The government had projects that were they were shovel ready to be built. And so what you're seeing is sort of that gradual escalation up to about 2 years ago. And so some of the carryover would be those projects into 2015, into 2016 as they start to taper off. So now everybody is building. If you notice, I'm driving in this morning, we have no more surface lots. There's tower cranes all over the city, so everybody is building. And as Director Skibby talked about, the MNUCP includes firms that are certified by a number of agencies. And we're not the only entity certifying, nor are we the only entity building right now. So the private sector and the public sector are both building. we're all drawing from that same universe of small, woman-owned and minority-owned businesses. So now everybody is working. So the competition for folks that are in our SUBP is a lot greater because they are diverse over the state of Minnesota and working on a lot of contracts, which is a good thing for those businesses and workers because they're fully employed. But no, maybe it doesn't look so great on our slide because it looks like it's going down. But I think Director Skibby will be reporting about this next quarter, that the State Human Rights Department also recognizes this growth in the amount of work that's out there. And they're going to be doing some recalculation of the workforce goals to make them a bit more realistic what's happening in the metro, because building is happening all over the state right now. So that, I think, is the explanation for why it looks like a huge decrease. And it is, but it isn't a decrease in the amount of work for workers and businesses in the metro.
Sure. Thank you both.
And if I can jump onto that, Director Corbel, you had mentioned that, let's say a few years ago, I mean, government was the only driver of, let's say, development that was happening. And I mean, does that suggest that government just does it a little bit better than the private sector in terms of, women businesses or minority businesses? I mean, in terms of inclusion and participation, or is it a factor of, like, where government was a couple of years ago to where we are now? There's just a lot more projects, and so workers are much more spread across, I guess, all sectors everywhere.
There's a two-part answer to that, because if you remember back in 2013, 2014, the city had also been the recipient of some of the stimulus money, the ERA money. And so there were projects that were shovel ready, that there were funds ready to be put towards those projects, and they were ready to be built. And the government was actually quite nimble in that regard and had projects ready to go and be built. And so that's why we were able to keep people working. But in general, the government is better at this than the private sector is. And I think a lot of it is just will to do it. So we do find when we talk about our equity and inclusion projects, that if the private sector was doing as well as the government was doing with regard to its equity and inclusion programs, there might not be a disparity. But the reality is they're not. No, some private sector companies do have high equity and inclusion numbers because it's just a matter of their business model. But for the most part, people, as you all know, tend to hire and recruit and train and promote people who look like them. And that's not always, women and people of color.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Skibby, I just want to tell you, I mean, we have a very friendly committee meetings. Nobody's going to do a gotcha thing, for you and all that stuff. But let me ask you this. I mean, when you look at, like, the minority business participation piece, I mean, I looked on one of those slides. I mean, we're at about 20%. The goal is 32%. I mean, what do we have to do to get to 32%? I mean, what are the things that are going to have to be extraordinary for us to get there, especially within the context of just the answer that was just given about how maybe government does it maybe a little bit better than the private sector? I mean, how do we incentivize or push the private sector to get to 32%?
Yeah, and that's a good question, Mr. Chair. And I think so I think the context of that 20% is important. If you'll note, I know from last year, I think the numbers are similar with the minority utilization, but if you look at it from 2011, 2012, 2013, right when the commissioner, the Department of Human Rights, set those higher goal numbers, there's been a significant increase. I think in 2013, the numbers were around 11 or 14%. And so there's been a significant increase during that time. So I think just the presence of that goal is significant. I also think the additional resources are significant and should have a positive impact as well. We're actually filling a position for affirmative action officer within the division coming up here in the next month or so, and plan to use that position to review contractors and what they're doing to reach out to these communities and bring in more workers from minority and female backgrounds. So I think that those efforts together should have a significant impact on that, and I think that will go a long way towards getting us, bridging that divide between the goal and the present participation.
Can you get to that slide on your presentation?
I'm sorry, when we move to
Yeah.
the slide?
Yeah, can you get to that slide? Yeah, I think it's that one. So, when you talk about just these increases, I mean, are we trying to study these increases to explain why there were increases of maybe, 1 or 2% to about 4% or any of that stuff so that we actually have a good sense of, how we work towards 32?
Yeah, I mean, so, Mr. Chair, I think the slides, the slides are providing very basic data, and there's probably more in-depth data provided in the report that we've linked. And then we also have, if you'd want to go through it project by project, we have that information, more of that raw data available as well.
Right.
And I think some of it varies by project, some of it varies by contractor. As Director Corbel mentioned, um, companies, private sector companies, some of their inclusion numbers are reflected by their company philosophy, their business model, and how committed they are to these programs. And so depending on the contractor you have working on the city projects, they can either meet the standards that they have to meet, or they can go above and beyond. So I think that can have a reflection on the numbers and then the size of the contracts that those contractors have. So there are a lot of those variables in place. But again, I think moving it as a whole, as a program, you have sort of those structural components with the affirmative action officer and the additional resources that are allocated to that, and the ways we can leverage those as a division towards moving, as a program, moving those numbers upwards.
Okay. All right.
Um, Mr. Chair, I think you're also asking about how do we increase the supply of workers in the workforce and what's being done about that in the metro area. And so this is a layered and very complicated answer because it's the same answer that people get when you talk about the graduation rates, when you talk about achievement in schools, what's happening with that. So it really is a factor of uh, making construction work or selling construction work as an attractive alternative. And as we all know, if we've been paying attention to um, where the growth in jobs is, construction is one of those areas. So it really is selling to young people while they're in middle school and while they're in high school that construction is an attractive occupation, and it is not and it's something that can provide a good living. And it is an alternative to going to a four-year school and becoming, I don't know, like my daughter, a mass communication major. My husband and I are still trying to figure out how she's going to use that degree. But it needs to start early. And there are some programs in town that are going out and trying to get to these young people early to create a pipeline of female and minority workers into those training programs. But it really is a factor of supply as well, because that's why when there's a lot of work going on, then it looks like the numbers go down, but we're not creating that supply fast enough. So it is convincing young people that this occupation is out there and supporting those programs that go out and try to appeal to those folk like my daughter who may have some education in something that might not be yielding the type of career that they thought they would have, and attracting them into the occupation. And so it really is um, the same dilemma that we wrestle with across education in general, is how to just build that supply and create that pipeline. So we've got good programs here in the city for doing that, but they're not as widespread as we'd like.
Councilmember Gordon?
Thank you. I appreciate it. I have a couple questions. I'm a little bit confused about the section on the report that talks about good faith effort reviews. And it says that through the fourth quarter, 21 out of 46 projects met the goals for minority and business inclusion. And do we have good faith effort requirements also for the workforce inclusion? And, okay, let me go back to that piece then. When we talk about the goals they didn't meet, are those the goals that we set or the goals that they set on their projects for business inclusion?
So in the linked document, there's a little bit better explanation about what good faith efforts is. But let me just try
That's
to give
what
you
I'm
the
reading
thumbnail,
from.
the thumbnail view. When a project is bid, the department looks for workforce, let me just start for business, looks at the scope of work and the engineering drawings and et cetera. and sets a goal based on what we can reasonably expect to be accomplished on that project based on the supply of businesses in our directories. So that's what happens with businesses. So we have a little bit more flexibility in how we set the business goal. With the workforce goal, that goal was established by the commissioner at the Department of Human Rights. So when a workforce goal is set on a project, it's 32% because that's the goal that the commissioner set for the metro. When a workforce goal is set for women, it's set at 6% because that's the goal that the commissioner set over at the Department of Human Rights. So what happens with good faith efforts throughout a project, when a company decides, when it's selected to work on a city project, it has a workforce that it comes in with. And what the staff is monitoring through their compliance work is when that workforce ebbs and flows, how many women and minorities are coming into the workforce. And they do that through the payrolls that they're watching come in to the software system that we have in the department. So there is a requirement on businesses to perform good faith efforts throughout the life of a project. But with construction, where you really tend to get the workforce numbers is with the subcontractors, because we try to make sure that women and minority businesses are included on those contracts. And that's usually where you also get the diverse workforce from those women and minority businesses, because a majority contractor is usually going to come in with the workforce that it has in its company. And there's not a lot of ebb and flow or fluctuation in those numbers. So not only are the minority and women businesses responsible for helping us meet the inclusion goals for business, they're in large part also responsible for helping us meet the goals for workforce.
So they're definitely connected. And
They are.
And so when I read something that says 21 out of the 46 only, and I'll say just to emphasize where I come at when I see those numbers, only 21 out of the 46, that's not even half, actually met the goals for business inclusion. And then I understand that getting those businesses in there is also what's going to help with the workforce. I'm saying, well, 21 isn't good enough. And I totally agree. We need to train people. We need to get them interested in these careers. We need to be building it all the way up. And then we also have to be having really clear expectations and raise them, and maybe some consequences for those 26, it's almost half, I'll admit that, but who didn't reach their goals. Why didn't you reach them? What are you going to do next time when you come in and you want to get a contract now? And what should our expectations be on you? And so,
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, you raise an excellent point. You know, after much, a lot of case law, a lot of changes to constitutional challenges, changes to processes. You know, back in the old days, when companies or government first started to do these kinds of programs, they would set a goal for, say the goal was 10%. And if a company came in and didn't reach that 10%, they just wouldn't give the business to that company. Well, a lot of companies started to sue and say, look, we're doing the best that we can. There's just nothing out here. And they said, well, prove to us that you're doing the best that you can to get to the 10%, and you're just failing to do that. So that's when the whole concept of good faith efforts arose. So there's a multi-step process that a company has to go through in order to achieve a goal. It's just not magic. You still, you have to advertise, you have to invite, you have to evaluate, you have to do all of those things. So we believe in the Civil Rights Department that if a company goes through all of those steps, they're likely going to meet the goal. But there are cases, and you see 21 of them, where they go through all of those steps and they don't meet the numerical goal that's set on the project. Yeah. Now, there's a team of staff inside the Civil Rights Department that meets about 2 or 3 times a week. There is a good faith efforts evaluation team, and they have some very stringent evaluation that they go through to look at how well a company did on all of those steps that it took to try to get to that goal. And they didn't get to the numerical goal, but yeah, we think you did in good faith attempt to get there. And we have turned some companies down because they didn't do what they were supposed to do in order to meet the goal. So so there is, it's a balance. So we're trying to be as strict as we can on having companies meet the goals that we set. But we're also trying to keep the city out of hot water because we have put some constitutionally unenforceable, what was it that they used to call it? I'm trying to think of it, what quota on a project, because that's just not, we can't do that.
we don't like to use that word.
Yeah.
We like to achieve certain goals. So I also got a little bit confused because it said pre-award reviews, and when I was reading the report, it looked like there were 46 completed projects, and 21 of them didn't meet their goals through the fourth quarter. And it looked like these 3 contractors were denied their contracts because just in their applications, they didn't say they were going to try hard enough. So can you clarify that for me, that the 3 were denied the contract, but the other 46 actually, did they end up completing their projects? And that's how we know they did not meet their goals, right?
Yeah, Councilmember Gordon and Mr. Chair, the 46 pre-award reviews are done prior to award. And so on these projects where there is a goal, meeting the goal or demonstrating good faith efforts is a condition of award. And so on what you see is the 21 projects that committed to meeting the project goals, they're awarded because they've outlined the path for how they're going to meet the goal. We verified that in the office and then authorized award. And then those 25 projects that did not meet the goals, out of those 25, 22 were awarded the project, and then 3 contracts essentially were denied a contract award for failure to demonstrate good faith efforts.
So that,
So unlike Sean hasn't been here long enough to understand the shorthand in some of the questions. So, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Gordon, I think you're asking, if I heard you correctly, when a good faith efforts is denied, then who gets the contract? So the way this happens, the city looks at the 3 lowest responsible bidders. We get to do a good faith efforts evaluation on the one that looks like it's going to be the winning bidder. If it does not satisfy its good faith efforts requirement, the city goes to the next lowest bidder. So the first one gets kicked out, they go to the next one. So the person that gets kicked out of the process does not get a contract with the city, and so it goes to that the next company, who then has to go through that same good faith efforts process. And so if nobody satisfies the good faith efforts requirements, there's a tough conversation that we have to have with the purchasing department and their project managers to say, we may need to go out and rebid this because something happened in the process and we weren't able to satisfy the city value for equity and inclusion. We need to do some different things. So we have that conversation.
okay, and I'll look at the report again. I'm just a little bit confused about what projects actually got completed. When we say through the fourth quarter, 21 out of 46 projects met the goals for business inclusion, and 25 did not meet the goals. I'm assuming those projects were actually done, and we look back at
that's
their
not,
subcontractors. That's
Mr.
not
Chair,
true.
Councilmember Gordon, in the report, when you look at the report, you will see numbers for closed projects. Those are actually finished. But this number is indicative of what may be in the pipeline now. Some may be closed, but in the quarter, those are the evaluations that the staff conducted. So some are still in progress.
And
Okay.
Councilmember Gordon, when you're looking at the numbers, 21 are meeting the project goals, 25 are not, but they can show a good faith effort. So essentially, they're in the same category as those 21. So that's what the numbers are saying too.
So of the 46 pre-award reviews that happened in the quarter, some of the projects may be complete because they could get done in 3 months, but many of them are still ongoing. And if you look at the back of the report document that you got, you'll be able to see some of that information.
So those 21 might not even meet the goals.
Unless we are on them constantly, because they do try to get away with stuff.
I'm sure some of them
But the
try really
compliance
hard.
team is on them constantly, so.
All right, well, thanks, sir, for taking up so much
No,
time.
not a problem. Council members, any other comments or any other discussion? All right, seeing none, I will move this item to be received and file. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And we are done with our business, so we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.